speaks in every language across the sky to every nation. You are beauty unimagined. This is who you are. You are the Lord of my salvation. You are the one who lights my way through the dark night. You will lead me. This is who you are. This is who you are. Lift it up, endless praises to our God. Full of grace, full of love, He's reigning over us. I know you are faithful, you are worthy, God. This is who you are. Day and night the angels sing, holy, holy is the Lord. There's none more worthy to receive it. This is who you are. Oh, lift it up, endless praises to our God. Full of grace, full of love, and He's reigning over us. I know you are faithful, you are worthy, God. This is who you are. Oh, you hear the cry, you hear the cry of every broken heart. You give the hopeless soul a brand new start. You lead the captive in your freedom song. This is who you are. And in the night when all our hope is lost, you are the one who won't give up on us. You hold the orphan in your loving arms. This is who you are. I know. This is who you are. Oh, I believe it. This is who you are. Lift it up, lift it up. Oh, lift it up, lift it up. Lift it up, endless praises to our God. Full of grace, full of love, and He's reigning over us. I know you are faithful, you are worthy, God. This is who you are. Oh, this is who you are. Lift it up, lift it up.
Praise your heavenly name.
Oh, lift it up, lift it up.
Praise to the King.
Lift it up, endless praises to our God. Full of grace, full of love, He's reigning over us. I know you are faithful, you are worthy, God. This is who
there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. And through every trial, my soul will sing, no turning back. Been set free. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. And everything I need is in you. And everything I need. Christ, my all in all. My joy and my salvation. In this hope will never fail. 'Cause heaven is our home. And through every storm, my soul will sing, Jesus is here. To God be the glory. Christ is enough for me. Yeah, Christ is enough for me. And everything I need is in you. Everything I need. Oh, you're everything. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. 'Cause Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. And everything I need, sing it again. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need.
Welcome to our online service for SouthRidge Fellowship. My name is Paul. I'm one of the pastors here, and I just want to welcome you here. If you're new here, I just encourage you to go to our website, southridgefellowship.ca, and just click on the Connect card and just introduce yourselves to us. We'd love to get to know you. We'd love to just share some of the great things that are happening here at the church and just be able to share those things with you. So please take the time to do that. We'd really enjoy getting to know you. Also, there's a number of other things on our website, such as how to give and other things as far as ministry opportunities going on. So please have a look at our website at southridgefellowship.ca. Just a couple things that we want to connect with you about. And the first one is about a mission trip to Greece. This is going to be taking place on June 29th to July 10th. And we have an informational meeting coming up on March 6th here at SouthRidge. And so we'd love to have you join us on that if you're interested. We're going to be joining Alexander and Kendra McCree as our missionaries there. It's going to be a great trip. So if you're interested in it, please come to the informational meeting where you're going to get a lot more of the information. Global Sunday is happening on the 27th. We'd love to have you part of that. So you come in person. We have a number of missionaries that are just going to be sharing about what's going on in their mission field. They're going to be doing that by video, and we're really excited to share those videos with you. Plus, after the service, we've got a number of tables out in the foyer, just sharing some of the local missions that are going on here in our area. So you want to be able to come to that. It'll be a great time as we see what God's doing locally and globally as well. And then lastly, on the 27th as well, we have our partners meeting in the evening at 7 p.m. That will be in person or online. We'll send out the link for the online Zoom, but we'd love to have you part of that. And so partners, if you are a partner at SouthRidge, please plan on being there. If you're not, you're more than welcome to still join us, just to hearing what God's doing through this past year and where we're looking at going in this coming year. Let's now take a part in the message as we hear what God is doing through the book of Philippians.
In June of 2005, I was elected by the partners at SouthRidge to become SouthRidge's lead pastor. And it wasn't 100% vote that I got. There was a few people that voted against me, and not surprisingly, because everyone in the church knew me, knew who I was. I had been in the church for 9 years at that point already, on staff for a few years as well, and so everyone really knew what they were getting. There was no guessing. And the following month in July, I had a couple ask if they could meet with me. And so I said, sure, a brand new lead pastor, having this couple come in. They came in and sat down, and they'd been with the church since the beginning. And so I'd known them for 9, even 10 years. And they said, hey, Brent, we just wanted to let you know that we were 2 of the people that voted against you. And we just don't think we can stay under your leadership here at SouthRidge, so we're going to leave SouthRidge and go to another church. And as much as that hurt me in the moment, because no one likes to hear that message, I don't think, I thank them for coming and talking to me and being honest, because most people would just kind of slip away and never actually tell you that they're leaving. And you know what? As much as we wish it, as much as we want, the reality is that not everyone is going to agree with us. And if you ever get put into a position of leadership, if God ever calls you into a position of leader, especially in the church, there are going to be people who don't agree with your decisions or don't agree that you should be the leader in that position. And so it's interesting because we're going to pick up today in Philippians chapter 3, this statement that Paul makes. And it's an odd statement and an interesting statement. And sometimes, to be honest, it's a statement that I as a leader might wish I could say to people. So let us start reading in Philippians chapter 3. We're going to read 15 to the end of the chapter. Okay? Here's what Paul says. All of us, then, who are mature should take such a view of things. And if on some point you think differently, that too God will make clear to you. Only let us live up to what we have already attained. Join together in following my example, brother and sisters, and just as you have us as a model, keep your eyes on those who live as we do. For as I have often told you before, and now tell you again, even with tears, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their destiny is destruction, their God is their stomach, and their glory is in their shame. Their mind is set on earthly things. But our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control will transform our lowly bodies so that they will be like his glorious body. And I don't know if you saw that first verse where Paul basically says this. He says, look, those of you who are mature, like that's what everyone wants to be, right? The mature people, the mature ones. Everyone who's mature should have the same view that I've just shared, the same view that I've been saying you should have. And if you have a disagreement with that, God will make it clear to you, meaning you're wrong. Like, I think every leader at some point has wanted to say that to someone. Probably should never say that to people, or very rarely say that to people, but every leader, if they're honest, has been tempted to say that. If you don't agree with me, you're wrong, and God will sort you out. That seems to be what Paul is saying here, isn't it? So what is Paul saying here? Is that actually what he's saying, or is there an understanding that we need to come to really grasp what he's trying to say to the Philippian church? And there's actually, I think, a couple of different ways to understand this verse. And it actually has to do with a couple of different translations of the Bible. So if you have the ESV translation, and you were following along last week with our message in the previous verses, you might have had this thought, Brent, why are you stopping at verse 14? Because in my Bible, the paragraph continues to include verses 15 and 16. And that's what it looks like in the ESV. And the way the ESV writers or the translators are telling us is that they believe that these two verses, 15 and 16, actually go together with the verses from 12 on. And so if that's the case, what they're saying is that if you're mature in your faith, you will press on. You will commit to running the race. You will stay the course. You will give all your effort to doing what God has called you to do. You're not going to let up. You're not going to let go, except for the things that you need to forget. And that's what we looked at last week. You will continue to commit. You'll continue to do what God has called you to do. But the NIV translators have separated 15 and 16 from 12 on. They actually have it as a new paragraph, meaning that it's kind of a new thought. And I think that the NIV is pointing out that these verses 15 and 16 are actually tying us back to previous verses, the previous sections, beyond just verse 12. So it has more to do than just with running the race. It has to do with the things that Paul was talking about in chapter 3 and even in chapter 2, I think. He's talking about the fundamentals of the faith. He's talking about salvation. He's talking about Christology and who Jesus is. And what I think he's saying to us in 15 and 15 is that you need to have the basics of the faith, a basic understanding of what salvation really is. Not clouded by the Judaizers, not clouded by legalism. And you also have to understand who Jesus Christ really is. That he's the Son of God, that he came to die for us, and that by dying for us, he made it possible for us to be saved. Basically, what I think Paul's saying here is the mature are the ones who understand and believe the core elements of the faith. Paul kind of talks about this when he's writing his letter to Timothy, and he's talking about who should be leaders in the church. And he says this, the leaders must hold to the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. I think he's referring to the same thing here as he's saying to the Philippians, that the leaders, those who are mature, must have a good grasp on the core elements of the faith, and they must live them out. Regardless of how you interpret this passage, whether it connects to 12 and on or goes further back, Paul is helping us in this passage by telling us that there's 3 signs of maturity. And so even though he says, hey, you who are mature should have the same viewpoint as me, he helps us understand what maturity looks like in the church. And the first thing is that humility is the thing that leads to maturity, and that's verse 15, where he talks about if you think differently, God will reveal it to you. You see, we get so stuck on what we think is right, what our beliefs are. And with that comes a certain element of pride. And for us to be able to come to the place where we acknowledge that maybe we have a wrong belief or we do have a wrong belief and shift to what is God's truth, that takes humility. And that's what Paul is pointing out here, is that the mature believer, the mature Christians, are the ones who are willing to learn from God. They're open to learn from God, to change their direction, to change their beliefs even, if God through His Word points out to us that we're wrong. And so maturity comes from humility. This verse has taken on a whole new meaning for me as I read it and as I prepped it. You see, I have had good eyesight for my entire life. Then when I turned 49, I started to notice that I was, straining to read some print sometimes if it was smaller. And then when I turned 50 last November, I came to the place where I actually need to start wearing reading glasses more often than not to read the commentaries or books that I'm reading. And so it's, when you come to the place where you start realizing you need help to be able to do the things you used to do, that takes some humility. Although, maybe I'm not as humble as I should be, because I'm really fighting to the point where I don't want to wear glasses here while I'm preaching, so I'm really putting it off. So that's why I hold my Bible a little further away when I read. That's why I do it, because I can see it then, right? You see, and I know some of you youngers are going, I don't even get this. One day you will. Anyone who's gone through that sort of experience knows it's a humbling experience, because you have to change what you're doing in order to function. Humility is a prerequisite in order for God to speak to you. You need humility for God to speak to you. And that's what Paul is saying at the end of verse 15 there. And then he goes on in verse 16 to give us another indicator of what maturity is. Maturity really comes when we live out what we know to be true. That's what he's saying here in verse 16. Let us live up to what we have already attained. When we know something is true, it should impact our actions. You see, mature Christians are congruent in both their beliefs and their actions. They both line up. There's no resonance there that's dissonant. Everything is congruent. They make sense together. They go together. You see, an immature Christian often has a lot of head knowledge, and they may even say the right thing, but often their life does not match up. Their actions don't match up, or their character does not match up. There's no fruit that should be there. An immature Christian talks about faith, but never demonstrates it. An immature Christian talks about generosity, but never actually gives. An immature Christian can often talk about the importance of following Jesus, but they never serve. They never go into community. They never use their gifts. They never read their Bible, and they never pray. Paul is saying, look, the mature Christian is the person that knows what to live and then lives it out. They know what to believe, and that belief affects their actions. But Paul adds another thing, another sign of maturity, and it's found in verse 17. And in verse 17, he says that basically what he's saying is this: maturity is best seen in others. And he's talking about looking at role models, at mentors, godly people in the church, observe them, get to know their lives. See, our world desperately needs Christians who can show people how to love their spouse and make a marriage last, how to relate to their kids, how to do business with integrity, how to live with ongoing sickness, how to handle conflict in a way that would honor Jesus. We learn these lessons oftentimes best when we watch others go through them before us. and we see how they respond in a godly, Christ-like manner. What Paul, I think, is saying here is we need examples more than we need explanations. We need to see it lived out so that we know it's true. And so a step into maturity is making sure we're surrounding ourselves with people who are mature. I don't know if you recognize the name Ernest Kent Coulter. You probably don't. It's probably unfamiliar to you. But Ernest walked away from a promising journaling, a career as a journalist. How about I say that? And he went to serve as a clerk in the New York children's court system. And while he was there, he was disturbed by the procession of juveniles who would come through the state's penal system. And time again, he witnessed a pattern. And the pattern would be this: a youth got into trouble, was branded a bad kid, got into more scrapes with the law, and eventually would go and grow into an adult criminal. In an effort to deal with this ever-increasing number of repeat juvenile offenders, the presiding judge persuaded 90 community leaders to befriend one delinquent child each, one juvenile kid in his system, one each. Coulter noted that a remarkable change occurred in these children. You see, having access to a positive influence radically altered the behavior of these boys. Former juvenile delinquents transformed into model citizens. Inspired by the success of this kind of informal mentoring program, Coulter set out to campaign to recruit more volunteers. And so one night he appeared before his church, the New York Central Presbyterian Church. And he relayed the story of a young boy on the brink of being sent away into a detention center. And this is what he said to the group that was gathered there. There is only one possible way to save the youngster, and that is to have some earnest, true men volunteer to be his big brother, to look after him, to help him to do right, to make the little chap feel that there is at least one human being in this great city who takes a personal interest in him, who cares whether he lives or dies. His impassioned plea on that evening attracted 39 volunteers. And then over the next little while, more and more men joined him. And this prompted Coulter to form what is now known as the Big Brother Association. This movement started in 1904. And now, more than 100 years later, the Big Brother and Big Sister continues to mobilize volunteers to initiate one-on-one mentoring activities and relationships with at-risk kids. They've done some research on the effect of the Big Brother and Big Sister program, and this is what they found. Youth with a big brother or big sister are 46% less likely to begin using illicit drugs, 27% less likely to begin using alcohol, and 52% less likely to skip school. These are kids in bad situations, at-risk situations, and just having one good mentor, one good role model, one good influence changes their lives significantly. And I think when Paul is writing these words to the Philippians, he knows the power of a good role model. He knows the power of influence. He knows how powerful that can be to someone. And here's the problem with role models, because he realizes this as well. You can follow the wrong one. Paul here goes on in verse 18 to talk about some of the people who were in the church, and he labels them as enemies of the cross, meaning that there were people in the church that were potentially influencing the Philippians to lead lives that were not honoring to God. In fact, they were at cross purposes to what Jesus would want them to live. And they might have been the Judaizers, which we talked about last week, or they might have been people who were advocating, unrestrained freedom, this new freedom that they found with being in the church and going too far. And they may have been people who claimed to be mature in the faith, and they may have been people who were encouraging others to follow them, But Paul points out that their lives were lived in such a way that it showed that they were actually enemies of the cross of Christ. And I think it's a good point to just stop here for a second and be reminded that the cross is pivotal to our faith. And that's why I think Paul uses this in his language here. The cross is pivotal to everything that we understand about salvation and Jesus. You see, the cross is at the heart of the gospel. It is proof that God loves sinners. It's Romans 5:8, where Paul writes to the Roman church, but God demonstrated his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. The cross that Jesus died on shows us that God loves us. The cross reminds us of God's hatred for sin, but also reminds us of his grace. The cross is the thing that ended our separation from God. When Jesus died on the cross, the veil in the temple was torn in two. That veil that separated the Holy of Holies where God was and the rest of the people, that now was done away with. That's what the cross did. The cross also broke down religious barriers, as we saw last week, where it made circumcision obsolete. You didn't have to do it anymore. The cross also broke down racial barriers because the church, as it was experiencing, there was no longer a separation between Jews and Gentiles. The cross is such a pivotal part of our faith, so pivotal to our understanding of salvation and Jesus. And Paul is saying that pivotal piece, these are enemies to the cross. They are living their lives in such a way that they should not be followed. And Paul goes on in the next verse to give us 4 indicators of how these people are living, the 4 ways to identify the enemies of the cross. The first thing, one of the things he tells us is this, what they worship. Enemies of the cross don't worship the same thing we do. Enemies of the cross worship their stomach or bellies, he says, and what Paul is getting at here is they worship whatever satisfies them. They hunger after things. They pursue after things to satisfy themselves. They have sensual appetites, not godly appetites. And this is really just a humanistic view of the world, where it says that the only way your desires and needs can be met are when you pursue them, and that's when you'll find happiness. That's when you'll find contentment. Not pursuing Jesus, not finding everything in Jesus, but pursuing what we believe we need and want. What they worship identifies them as enemies of the cross. The second thing then is what they celebrate. The things they glory in, as Paul puts it, are actually shameful things. It reminds you of what Paul had to write to the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians 5, where he takes the church to task because there was a man in their church who was sleeping with his stepmom, and the church was proud of it. That type of thing they were celebrating. And Paul says, no, that's not what you celebrate. The third thing that Paul points out is what they actually focus on. And he says that they focus on earthly things. They pursue material things, possessions or positions. Paul expands on this in Romans 8, verse 5, when he says, those who live according to the flesh or earthly things have their minds set on what the flesh desires. But those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their minds set on what the Spirit desires. He's saying that those who are enemies of the cross have their minds set on earthly things, things of the flesh. Mature believers have a very different mindset. And then, lastly, the fourth thing he tells us in this verse, and it's the first thing he writes, is telling us where they end up. That's how we know the identity of those who are enemies of the cross. And he says that their end is destruction. And if you continue reading in Romans 8, verse 6, it says this, the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God. This word destruction carries with it the idea of waste and lostness. This word is used in John 17:12, where Jesus is talking about Judas, and he refers to Judas as the one doomed to destruction. So the enemies of the cross have the same end as Judas did. They're all doomed to destruction. And yet it's not just talking about a final destination here. Paul, I think, is also pointing out that those who are enemies of the cross end up living a wasted life because they pursue things that don't matter for eternity. They look good now, they might satisfy now, but in eternity they mean nothing. And I think this is Paul's warning to us. Paul is saying, be careful who you pattern your life after. We need to pattern our life, and we do it naturally. I mean, we all pattern our life after someone. Sometimes it's consciously, sometimes it's unconsciously or subconsciously, right? I guess we don't, when we're unconscious, we don't pattern ourselves after anyone. No, subconsciously. You know, it's the sports hero we want to be like when we're younger. It's that person on TikTok who has 1 million followers who we would love to have that same platform. It's the business person who has a successful business. It's the deep thinking author that we admire. It's the parent who seems to have successfully raised their kids. Those are the people we want to be like, right? And so we start patterning ourselves after them. I'm having trouble talking today, aren't I? You see, what Paul is warning us here is this. One type of role model will pull us heavenward, while the other one will pull us towards hell. Which is a good thing to think about. What's the greatest positive Christ-like influence in your life? What has been that, huh? Probably not a sermon or a seminar or even a book, although all those have probably had some influence in you. But probably the greatest positive Christ-like influence in your life has been someone who has shaped you through their life, through a personal relationship. You know, I have had so many in my life. I could probably list off 20 or 30 men and women who have impacted me significantly. And whether it's my parents or those who are no longer with us, like Jim Christensen or Ray Olafson, or I could list name after name of people in our church. I've been fortunate to be blessed by having so many role models to be able to live beside. I mean, after reading what Paul has to say here, you can understand why God in His wisdom created the church, a family that is full of mentors and role models for your benefits, right? I mean, that's why connecting to a small group is so crucial to your spiritual growth. Being in community with a few people provides a regular opportunity for you to learn from each other and for others to learn from you. I think it's a good point to remember right here, is that oftentimes I think in our church culture of today, we tend to look for our mentors in faraway places. And whether it's pastors in churches that we listen to their messages, or whether it's an author that you read or a podcaster that you follow, you have to remember that they have a crafted life that they're presenting to you. You don't really know them. And it's not that you can't learn stuff from them, and it's not wrong to learn from them, and God uses that avenue of learning in incredible ways. But you do need to be in relationship with people that are in front of your eyes. That's what Paul is getting at here. He's challenging us, encouraging us to be in relationships with people who will be amazing influences on us to help us become more Christ-like and mature in our faith. And then he ends this passage with 2 final reminders. The first one is this: earth is not your home. Your citizenship is in heaven. And so this, I think, is picking up on the previous verse where he's just reminding us, guys, your focus shouldn't be on earthly things. It should be on things that last into eternity, which is something we talked about last week when we were looking at the previous verses. And I think what he's telling us here and reminding us here, and the church, the Philippian church, is this. When you face suffering, remember, you're a citizen of heaven. That's the hope you hold on to. When you face suffering, you got to remember that this life is temporary. It will be over one day. Or when you are tempted to chase after the pleasures of this world, tempted to have your focus on earthly things, be reminded that they don't last. That the things that last into eternity are the things that Jesus has for you, the things that help us be good citizens in the kingdom of heaven. I think Paul is also reminding us in these verses when he talks about our body, is this, that when your body is failing you, which happens when you get older, you know, when it's failing you because you have cancer or poor eyesight or high blood pressure or arthritis or diabetes, you get a new one when you get to heaven, a better one even. So whatever we're going through right now, whatever you're going through right now, it may feel like it is forever. But remember, it's only temporary. Eternity is the thing that is forever. And so Paul is reminding us, earth is not our home. We have something that gives us so much more hope, that allows us to go through these things. And then you get to verse 1 of chapter 4, and he finishes this section, I think, with this verse. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord. In this way, dear friends. And what he's telling us, the second thing, after reminding us that earth isn't our home, stand firm. So whatever you're going through, Paul is saying, hey, stick it out, stand firm. Even if you're under constant pressure to slip or take your eyes off the cross or forget that you're a citizen of heaven, don't slacken in your commitment. Continue to press on. Stand firm. I want to close by just saying thank you. Thank you to all the mentors who are in SouthRidge, all the mature believers that we have here. Thank you for allowing others to see that your faith is real and authentic, and allowing others into your life in community so that they can tangibly see what you are doing. Thank you for being a role model to the people of SouthRidge. For some of you listening, you need to just ask yourself this question: are you ready to step into becoming more mature? Are you willing to be humble and see what God has to teach you, or where you may have something wrong? Do you need to examine your life and see if your beliefs actually match your actions? Do you have other godly people in your life that you can pattern your life after? Or are you just trying to learn from people who are at a distance from you? Or maybe today you just need to be reminded of the hope that we have because of the salvation we have, and that we're citizens of heaven. And you just need to refocus on your heavenly citizenship. Or do you just need to hear the encouragement to stand firm and weather the storm that you're going through and rely on Jesus? Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this passage. Thank you for these words. God, it is a good reminder that we need to seek out role models that are godly, that we can pattern our life after. And God, I'm so thankful for so many people at SouthRidge who are mature, who are willing to have people look at them and are willing to be in other people's lives. It is a true honor to pastor this church with so many amazing people. God, I pray that this is a great reminder for us to live as we believe, to be humble before you, to step in those moments of community, and to pattern our life after the people that you have before us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for joining us for our service today. And I hope that through the music and through the message, God has really encouraged you and also challenged you in your walk with Him. Here's a few questions we'd like to leave with you just to help you in that process. Number 1, who has been a Christ-like influence in your life? Number 2, what aspects of your life might make you an enemy of the cross? And lastly, what do you need to focus on to become more mature in your faith? As you go through those questions, maybe you're sitting with someone, I'd just encourage you to talk about those questions together. If not, just go over the questions with you and the Lord and see what God brings out. We hope you have a great week. Just encourage you, if there's anything that we can do for you, we can pray for you, or however, just go to our website, southridgefellowship.ca, and find different ways to connect with us. We'd love to chat with you. Have a great week, Southridge.